prediction as we get into Middle Gothic to High Gothic? What is your prediction of what's going to happen? What's going to happen with buildings?
They get bigger.
They're going to get taller, absolutely. What else? What about the windows? They're going to get larger and more decorated, more stained glass. The tracery is going to start to shrink. What about the sculpture? What's going to happen to the sculpture? Nope, it's not going to go away. It's going to get more elaborate and it's going to get more advanced. So if you want to think of it this way, think of it as when we started to study Greek sculpture. Remember the beginning was very rigid and stiff, and then eventually when we got into the Hellenistic, it was very natural, realistic, and emotional, right? Remember, all that knowledge was kind of lost, and they're kind of, during this time period, are becoming reacquainted with it until we get to the Renaissance where it really starts happening. So this is the forerunner for the Renaissance, right? Where everything is really going to start popping. So 1150 to about 1400, actually it's it'd be more like 1200, change that, because 1400 is actually high. This is the age of great cathedrals. Look. Molly, really quick, yes. Molly, really quick. Or the opposite. And these great buildings are being driven not just by, oh, we want a new church. It's driven by economic and political parties, which we have gone through. Also, the church building, remember in the beginning, it was like, hurry up, get it done, because we want people to stop in our town. So it's going to be less of a barn raising, like, come on everybody, let's get together, let's put this cathedral together. It's going to be more, it just becomes less and it becomes more official as far as somebody designing it and plans and what do we want. So it's going to be a little more organized in that. France becomes an intellectual center of the Gothic Europe. If you want to see cathedrals, go to France, because that's where you're going to find all these beautiful things. I put Chartres as a cathedral that's going to be in Middle Gothic. Some people don't differentiate between early. They do go from early to high because it advances pretty quickly. I like to put a middle in here, and this is a great example of a middle. Why would I say that? Look at the towers. This tower versus this tower. What do you see the difference in?
One seems taller than the other.
Taller is definitely taller. So we have a knowledge for height. What else?
Like the style of the top.
The style of the top is definitely different. This is more of a Romanesque kind of style. This is more of a Gothic kind of style. So that's why I kind of put this church as the middle church, because we're moving towards more of a Gothic style. Tracery windows here are still pretty thick in that rose windows. But I think it's a good example of a transition between this and getting into the high. As we approach this particular church was built in 1145. Actually, it was rebuilt in 1145. The bottom definitely was Romanesque, and then in 1145 they started to rebuild. It was destroyed in 1194 by a fire, and then they started another rebuilding from 1194 to 1220. Okay, so we have parts of that Romanesque, and then of course the Gothic as the knowledge continues on.
Yes, sir.
The floor plan of it, the typical floor plan with ambulatories, variegated chapels, transepts, all those things you guys know. Here's what it looks like on the inside. And sometimes we have to keep remembering that these have great height when you walk in. Look at these little chairs. Look at the weight-bearing walls here. So what, holding all that, and there's rib bolts on the top. So look at where the chair goes, just to the base. of those piers. Yeah.
Is the transition between Romanesque and Gothic characteristic of just Middle Gothic, or is it throughout early, middle, and high?
They continues to change through all of them. They get more and more characteristics through them. Did I answer your question?
I don't know. I guess I was wondering, like, how specifically to distinguish middle from early and high, other than just it gets more elaborate.
Yeah, some people don't distinguish as a Middle Gothic. I do, just because I think Chartres is a nice example of the, between the two. Some people just go from early to High Gothic. And because of the length it takes to build a cathedral, it really gets difficult, because when it takes a couple of years, a lot of cathedrals have many parts, from the earlier part to the end of the part to some of the Romanesque. So it gets kind of messed up in between.
So it's just like a case-by-case basis?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely. Again, remember that, you know what, and I don't see stained glass windows here. I'm gonna make an assumption there. I'm gonna assume that they were probably destroyed and haven't been replaced yet. Probably destroyed during the war. Glass becomes a major medium. It's really important. Glass isn't just glass just put in your windows to keep the bugs out or to keep the wind out. Glass becomes a medium that is an artistic medium, okay? It elevates in status, in a sense. We start getting more clerestory windows up the top here, because we know how to take the weight off the walls and pull them down to the piers. The arches are pointed again, we get the flying buttresses, and the surfaces become embellished. By the way, what does Notre Dame mean? Specifically, Notre Dame.
Or is Notre New?
Something lady.
Yes, it's Our Lady. Okay, it's Our Lady. I believe every church that I'm showing you is a Notre Dame church. You guys always, if you heard of Notre Dame before, what do you normally think of? No, which is where?
It's a cartoon that we watch.
It's in Paris, right? Notre Dame of Paris. Notre Dame of Paris. And we always say Notre Dame, and most people just assume you're talking about the one in Paris. But this is Notre Dame of Chartres. And the next one's going to be Notre Dame. These are all dedicated to the Virgin Mary, these churches. And they're all called Notre Dame. Not every church, but the ones that it seems like the ones that become most famous are called Our Lady. Notice the transepts are starting to get a little bit longer. Definitely looks a lot more like a cross. And again, extending the churches, they extend from the nave out and they extend from the transepts out to get more room. Is this, you might want to switch to the new handout.
Just go have this in the packet.
If they start getting mixed up, it's because they started changing things around, and I did make the new one that I had, I kind of switched out on you. Okay, what's left from the Roman time period? Actually, these west portals are the only thing that's really left from the Romanesque time period. We have our mandolas on the top, which was a characteristic of the Romanesques. And this is, of course, later Romanesque. And here is the Virgin in the center here. Of course, this is who it's dedicated, Mary and Jesus. And along the outside are going to be your saints. Archivolts. Did I tell you that those are called archivolts, these things going around? We're going to be talking more about those in a little bit. Uh-oh. Huh. See all of this? Just got lost. Pull my jump drive out before it's saved. Nice. So I don't have pictures for you guys. So, the rest. So your next picture should be figures of kings and queens. Go to your other packet. We're just gonna have to not do the board. Sorry, folks.
So, will we do this another day, or will it not be on a test?
This isn't supposed to be there. That's not supposed to be there. I rearranged everything on here. let's go to this, you have this one right here, right? Stained glass, yeah,
So the stuff you just went through isn't gonna be on there?
it will be, we're gonna come back to it. Let me just see, maybe it's up later, oh, it's still there, never mind. It's still there, Oof. It's safe. Yeah, this should be here. That one should not be there. This should be further in your thing. This is high Gothic. We're gonna come back to that. Sorry, folks. So we'll come back to high Gothic. We're gonna come back to that if we have time. Okay, so this is your next one. Stained glass windows. I was just talking about stained glass windows as being this new medium that we have. They're larger now. Silica, they're using silica to seal them up in between so there's less leakage, so they can get rid of that heavy tracery, so that they can do that. They have multicolors. The colors they're creating is with metallic oxides. They're actually using gold and other very expensive materials in there. I'm not going to show you a video clip, but it's a really cool clip on how they make this, the process of making this. They take a big chunk of molten glass. Well, they take plain glass is basically silica sand, right? Heated up, and then they add the colorants in it, and then they get this whole big glob of glass on a rod, and then they take this and they take this molten glass and they blow it, and then they cut it open, and then it lays flat, because you know a cylinder really is a rectangle. So if you can imagine that this originally was a big chunk of glass, I have it on that rod, you guys know how glass is blown. They blow this into a cylinder, then they lay it on a slab, and they cut it, and it flattens out, and you have your piece of glass.
They do that in sections, or would it be like a giant slab of glass?
It'd be like a slab of glass. So then when you make your stained glass window, you have your pattern pieces and you have your slab of glass, and then you cut out your pieces to put in there. So this is many different colors of single glass cut and put together to create that image. It's a mosaic, basically, in a sense. So this is basically the process of making that glass. Copper oxide is what they use for green, cobalt is what they use for blue, and your reds, which is your most expensive ones, are going to be your gold. Your reds are actually made out of gold. So a lot of people call this the poor man's Bible. You can't afford a book, which most people can't afford a book. You can go to church and you can look at the windows and you can read the Bible that way. So again, it's for a person that can't afford a Bible, it's for a person that can't read, and it's a constant reminder. Creating a window, they would come up with a big template or a big plan to create this window. And then the subjects were drawn out. And then the patron, who is what? Who's a patron again?
Person that pays for it?
Yep, the person that pays for it. The patron approves it, and then a full-size cartoon is made. Okay, cartoon is not like Snoopy, okay? Cartoon is your pattern. Okay, so a big pattern is made, full size. The colors are chosen. If you have more money, you get to put more red in it. If you don't have money, you might have to stay away from the reds, because your red glass is going to be the most expensive glass. The glass is cut. Details are painted in, like the eyes, the nose, those things will be painted in. And then it's assembled, soldered, and then weatherproof. Okay, so that's basic how you assemble it. And that waterproofing, a lot of times, was like an oily cement that would put on there, and then the rain would repel that off. So those are your rose windows. Okay, why am I coming way back to this? Because this was one of our first churches that we looked at, correct? This is the beginning. The reason I'm coming back to this is because of the Old Testament kings and queens. They were put on the outside. That didn't leave. Why did they put kings and queens on the outside? And these were located in the jambs of the doors, these kings and queens, which we're going to see an example of it in the next slide. Because it was believed, and remember who that architect was? Abbot Sherha, looks like sugar. He believed that these were the ancestors of Christ, and that we needed to see them. Who are those ancestors of Christ? King Solomon is considered an ancestor of Christ. King Charlemagne was considered an ancestor of Christ. So these were actually put in there, in the portals. So it was just this basic idea that the abbot had. So these were the precursors. These kings and queens were the precursors to the coming of Christ. So they're Christ's ancestors. Family tree. This is our concept, I think. And this is where, in Shards, they continued with that theme. That's why I brought up the other church. It started in Saint Denis, and it continued on in Shards. They still have those kings and queens. This is later, but not really, because this is a part of the church that survived after a fire again. This is the rest part of the Shards. This was created in the early 1100s. It was destroyed by fire in 1194. So this was the only part that was really left from the original 1194. And of course, when historians look at this, they see the connections and how ideas traveled from one church to the other church. And so that was kind of a big thing for them to figure out. The rest of the church is basically Middle to High Gothic. And here's the figures. Please look at these big figures. Do they look proportionate? No. Why? They're very, very long. Right. They're long and skinny. They still look like columns. There's not much expression on them. They're very stiff. Oh wow, this sounds like we just went back to Greece and we're talking about Greece in the beginning of our sculpture there, right? So again, you can see how things continue on. And this is, by the way, the new packet that I gave you, right?
Yep.
So the next thing that we're going to look at is the tympium. Remember, the tympium is the thing that's on the top. This was the tympium that's in the center of this old part of the church. You can see that it's still Romanesque because of Amandro or Verisca in the center there. What you're looking at is Christ's throne, and here's his 12 apostles right there. And the evangelists, the four, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are being represented here by the person, one's a lion, one's an eagle. I can't remember what that one was. So that they're being represented right there. So this one's in the center. This one's on the right door. This one is the Virgin Mary. This is kind of another overthrow from the Romanesque time period. Mary holding Christ is a sign of Christ and his wisdom. And it's kind of a throwback to a theme that they used a lot of time during that time period. And what it's basically representing is that Christ is taking a human form. For the longest time, these are considered lintels because they go straight across. For the longest time I was looking at this one. This is supposed to represent Christ's infancy, and all I could see was a person in a coffin here. And so when I kept reading, I'm like, this can't be the right one. That's a person in a coffin. Why is that person in a coffin? But it's actually Mary giving birth. That's the nativity. So we have the Annunciation, the Visitation, the Nativity, and then the visits from the shepherds. So this is the example of Christ's infancy. The one up here is the presentation of Jesus in the temple. So again, this is just another proof that we are continually being educated we are continually learning about the Bible. What becomes very interesting is these archivolts that go around. What is happening in those things? Well, we have musicians playing bells. We have a grammar holding a switch. We have an astronomer. That is Halloween. Halloween, thank you. And the personification of astronomy. Why do we have these things in here? Why are they represented? What does that have to do with religion? Actually has what to do with the church. This cathedral was actually a very important school too. So basically what they are showing you is that this church is a Catholic school that is teaching the 7 liberal arts. So they are showing that on the outside. And all knowledge is seen to be divine from and returns to Christ. So it's all about the knowledge that we're given is given to us from Christ. So therefore we need to give our knowledge back to Christ. So that makes it a little more easy to understand why they would have those things on the outside. What becomes even more interesting, this is Christ ascending into heaven, and you can see the angels, and he's going up to heaven. But what becomes very interesting is this row here is the zodiacs, and this row here is the labors of the month. So we have the zodiac symbols, and we have labors of the months that are happening inside there. Archivolt sky, it's on there. No, it's not on there. It's Arch, A-R-C-H-I, and then Volts, V-O-L-T-S.
Wait, what?
Arch, A-R-C-H, and then I, and then Volts, V-O-L-T-S.
And what are those?
That's these things that curve around, and these are the zodiacs that is creating that archivolt around the art thing. The one on the left, I do know a little. I read about a couple of these. That one is actually the labor of August, and it's a man that is collecting grain. And above him, you see the bug. That's a zodiac symbol. It's supposed to be Leo. Looks more like a bug to me. The one above that is the labor of September, which is picking grapes right here. This one actually looks more like Leo. Doesn't that look like a bug? This one looks like Leo. And then this one looks like a frog. I'm sure it's not. Is that a scorpion? Anyhow, so those are the things. Taurus is on the inside. Just to give you what is happening with these columns and stuff, they're very elongated, which you guys mentioned earlier. They're very stiff and rigid. By contrast with the faces, they're not really realistic, pretty benign, pretty just a face. They're still tall and skinny and slide too over here, but there is some transition. So this is from the 1100, 1150, and this is from 1220. And you can see the transition that is starting to happen. It's not a real obvious transition that's happening, but it starts to get more and more obvious as we go. So you can see this other side of shards, which is built later. Look at what happens to the figures here. And then, if we want to go to another church that wasn't finished till 1439, look at what happens here. So again, that should be a real obvious transition for you to ID, just like when we studied the Greeks. But we go from starting to see the body again, a little less elongated, still really elongated, but very symmetrical. Everything is exactly the same. To look at this arrangement here. Look at the composition here. We're not so worried about them all being the same. Look at the expressions. Look at the individuality that's starting to come out in here. So again, you should be able to talk through that whole entire process. I am just going to quickly mention these because these are very famous cathedrals in France, of course. And of course, look at, oh my gosh, Our Lady. There's another one. This one is in Reims. 1211 to 1427. And of course, they all have their significance, and I'm not going to bog you down with all of those significance. But look at what happens to the windows, the towers. This one is actually symmetrical on the top. So the towers were probably finished closer to the same time period. Look at the archivolts on this. Look at how advanced the sculpture starts to get. Look at all these details. Look at these, they have little canopies and with angels inside all the way around. Look at this person. He has contrapposto happening here. He has a knee bent, straight leg here. He has a curve. Look at the fabric. These are almost coming away from the wall now. Before, they still look like columns. I mean, you can see the total round column. This looks like they're projecting out from the stone. So again, very similar to what we studied when we did the Greeks and the advancement they had. And here's the outside of it. Very beautiful. Here's the inside of Rheims. Again, we're looking for height and light. It has all the features like we looked before. Look at the stained glass window. Look at how tiny the tracery is getting on that stained glass window. Very minimal is holding it in. Look at the carving that is happening on the outside of the windows. It's getting to the point where everything is being carved. So here, quick between the different things that we have gone through. Romanesque, as far as statues go. I think we've gone through the architecture enough. Very stylized human figures appear attached to the wall. Symbolic sculptures to embody abstract ideas. Narrative teaching tools for the illiterate. And that really doesn't change. It's still a narrative. Early Gothic, stiff but less stylized, more natural. Disproportionately long to fit the narrow columns. Drapery lines thin and straight like the bodies. Figures begin to project more out into space. Figures represent real people, not just symbols for religious figures. And it's symmetrical. They're all the same. And then we get into the High Gothic, which is a steady increase in humanization, naturalism, and individuality. The flow in bulk and gain weight and volume. That's interesting spelling there. Almost detached from the walls. Contrapposto stance, individualized face. The drapery responds to the pull of gravity, reveals the figure beneath, and they're asymmetrical. They're not so worried about that all being the same. So we have about 15 minutes left of class, and I do want to show you that clip. And tomorrow we're going to talk, I have one day to talk about painting. I left you 2 slides to take notes, but I want you to get the feel of what these churches feel like when you walk in them. It'll help you. You should be feeling like you're walking into paradise.